me Mara, for the Almighty has dealt bitterly with me. I went away full, but the Lord brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi when the Lord has dealt harshly with me and the Almighty has brought calamity on me? What is there at the start of this book but bitterness, anger, and loss that seeps deep in your bones, fear that there will not be enough, loss of loved ones and security, and hope that the future could change? What is there at the beginning of this book but war and its echoes, hatred and its walls, the bitter lines between peoples, and the profound penalty for being desperate enough to cross them? Mark my words that Naomi's lament, her song of anguish at the end of this chapter, is entirely proportionate to the loss and pain our story tells. And if this is not the end of the story, it is not because we have gone around this pain, but through. Through the lament and pain and anguish, through the gift that Ruth was not obligated to give, through all the way to the hope that bears the marks of a world transformed. This story is set in times of famine and scarcity. There are real fears that the earth will not provide enough. There's been famine in the land of Israel, which sends Naomi, her husbands, and her sons on the way to Moab. And it is hunger that will drive them away from that place. That hunger that gnaws, that sets in the center, that fights and questions whether the earth will provide enough for the hungry mouths that depend on it. This story is set against great animosity and even hatred. The book of Judges tells stories of atrocity committed by the Moabites against the Israelites and the Israelites in return. Moab is in the modern-day land of Jordan. And the Hebrew people have a long history of conflict, some stories going all the way back to Exodus, where one wrong is laid upon the other and another in return. In the book of Deuteronomy, this great divide is encoded into law. As it reads, "No Ammonite or Moabite shall be admitted into the assembly of the Lord even unto the 10th generation. None of their descendants shall be admitted into the assembly of the Lord, and you shall never promote their welfare or prosperity as long as you live." 10 generations is a long time to remember. And so you can imagine the desperation that would have been required for Naomi's family to even consider leaving their home and crossing that line to be foreigners in the lands of Moab. You can imagine the ambivalence of Naomi's sons to be wed to Moabite women as the foreigner and the enemy across those lines. And then, of course, the story is set amidst a backdrop of loss. As first Naomi's husband, and then her 2 sons. They die and are buried, without an heir left behind. And this heartbreak is set as well against the backdrop of the patriarchal world that they knew. For who is left but 3 widows, 3 poor women, and all of them childless? The hope for the family's future has died, and with it, these women's hope of security. At this time and in this patriarchal structure, a woman cannot hold property or see to her own business affairs. These These three women are left without protection in a world that will not treat them kindly, and their future, their well-being, their bodily safety is at risk. So these are the givens. This is where we start before the action begins. This is the cruelty and loss of the world in which these women will make their choices. And a world like this is enough to lament. Because what are there here but those that are dead and dying? Scarce, heartless, cruel, hateful, and grim. Can we blame Naomi in her song of lament? Naomi, the name means pleasant. And she says it no longer suits her. She cannot carry her own name anymore. Call me Mara, she says. Mara, which means bitter. The best that Naomi can muster is to release her daughters-in-law of their obligation to her. This is a culture of deep obligation and care of elders, and Naomi frees them, telling them to go back to their mother's house to seek a new life, to seek the security of a new husband, to stay with her people, and she will return on her own. But Ruth does something else. There's a word in Hebrew called hesed. It's used several times in this book and is sometimes translated as loving kindness. It is a selfless act of kindness, one that is not obligated or required. Hesed is an act of generosity, a kindness unanticipated, and something that is by definition beyond the call of duty. Hesed at times requires sacrifice. It cannot be required or expected of another. But when it is given as a gift, it is often a gift with echoes. That kind of selfless, surprising kindness in love, it moves people. It is often reciprocated, surprisingly. Like dominoes in a row, like a snowball that keeps going, it has a tendency for an unexpected act of hesed, of unobligated loving kindness, at times leads to another, and another, and on and on. The Bible names God's hesed, how God's generous kindness often moves alongside the hesed of others. Into this world of pain and suffering, lament and loss, Ruth is a Moabite, a foreigner, a poor woman, and a widow. She has nothing to offer. And Ruth, in the midst of her pain, makes a promise of hesed. She makes a vow to Naomi, saying, "Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord do thus and more as well, as if even death parts me from you." Ruth's promise will make herself a foreigner in a strange land. She who has no power is promising to lend it to one whom she loves. The audience who would hear this story would think of the Moabites as villains, as untrustworthy. But here, Ruth the Moabite is showing a love that is unrequired, unobligated, and profound. In Scripture, there are very few examples of a non-Israelite making a vow of faith. The closest you'll find is when Ittai the Hittite, I know, a favorite of Bible stories everywhere. Ittai the Hittite makes a vow to follow King David. King David is on the run, and Ittai the Hittite makes this vow. He promises in Yahweh's name to follow David wherever he goes and to serve him. Ittai is a foreigner, and he makes a vow of fidelity to a king on the run. But these two stories are different in some crucial ways. As Ittai the Hittite, he comes with power and wealth. King David's star may be on the run, but there are rewards perhaps in the future when David once again sits on a throne. But Ruth is doing the opposite. A Jewish scholar, Tamara Kenazi, writes that Ruth has linked herself to a person of no standing, who seems to be going back to nothing, and with nothing, having to fend for herself alone. Ruth is pledging herself to a poor widow who has no sense that there will ever be a change in her fortune. It is Naomi herself who names that she has nothing. She is empty. She has nothing to offer but her anger and loss. And I found myself this week just trapped in Naomi's song in Bethlehem. Call me Mara, for the Lord has dealt bitterly with me. Because I feel her lament deeply, that wail that comes from loss, that lament from deep in her soul, that the Almighty has dealt bitterly. Because I know that there are those here who feel that wail of loss, of she who went out full and came back empty, thrust upon the cruel turns of the future in a world that proved indifferent to her cries, where a woman's pain does not matter. And throughout this week, I have felt the words on my tongue turn to bitterness. No longer call me Naomi, call me Mara. For it takes courage to lament, to be seen and visible, to put your pain on display. For this world does not treat kindly women who are angry or hurt, who do not let the pain just fester inside them and burn, that does not swallow the injustice within them to poison them from the inside out. But instead to have the courage to give the gift of their anguish to a world that does not see. And so in the midst of that, what is Ruth's act of love? What is it that is her act of courage? She does not say to a king, where you go, I will go. She does not promise to the powerful and the wealthy and the safe, where you lodge, I will lodge. She says to Naomi, who feels like she has nothing left. She says to Naomi, who can feel only her emptiness, her fear, her loss, and her bitterness. She says to Naomi, who does not even know if she can hold her own name with pride. Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Ruth promises to travel with Naomi into her anger and loss, her uncertainty and pain, the road that she does not know, and the bitterness that she feels rise up within her, and says, even here I will go with you, even unto death. And this is the act. This is the gift of love that God will use to transform the world. This is the act of Hesed that will have dominoes and ripples. This is the beginning of what will cascade to transform a world of scarcity into abundance, of uncertainty into safety, of death and loss and pain into a place where new life is possible. This is the act that will transform Bethlehem into a community where love is lifted across lines of difference, into a place where pain is made whole, and the women will end with singing. as the women of Bethlehem sing to Naomi that the Lord has been faithful to her, a restorer of life, a nourisher of old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you is more to you than 7 sons. This act will lead Ruth to name a new kingdom. And it starts here, with an unexpected act of love who promises to Mara, who can only taste bitter, that where you go, I will go too. And so, my church, we need to have the courage to go there too. This has been a week in the midst of a year. And I know how this week in particular has brought up trauma for many in our midst, and it's shown examples of how the worst of humanity can continue being the worst. And yet we are a people who hold Ruth on our lips. We are a people who have been transformed by one act of Hesed after another, and on and on and on. And we are a people who believe that unanticipated acts of kindness in God's name have the power to change this world. And so here is our promise. Where you go, we will go. Where you lodge, we will lodge. Your people are our people, and your God, our God. May God's blessing be upon